in the today's international webinar on COVID-19 and post-lockdown challenges in respect of economy, health, and environment, with special reference to India. India witnessed the biggest spike of COVID-19. The definition of containment zone has been changed day by day in order to cope up the situations. Under these circumstances, we have to have content in the proceedings of the webinar. So forget and consider this. Uh, we absolutely know the unlockdown must be faithful to health, and but in order to revive the economy, we have to have unlockdown. The environment can better be bridged between the adverse effect of health and economics. So we invite our today's speakers are Dr. Munmun Haq from Gulf Medical University and Ajman, UAE, Mr. Indrajit Adhikari from Anandabazar Patrika, Delhi correspondent, Dr. Subir Sen from IIT Roorkee, and the organizing committee invite you all in the chair of honor. So please take the seat and offer you the flower of humbles and putting chandan in your forehead as a mark of love, though virtually but innocently and cordially, hoping that with your erudite knowledge and speech, the house will be enriched, fulfill the purpose of August webinar. Uh, Switch over to the microphone to the Prolay Kundu.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jyoti Prakash Mondal sir, or our dear Jyotida, Assistant Professor in Economics, Raghunathpur College, Raghunathpur, Purulia. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Department of Economics, Raghunathpur College, I, Prolay Kundu, Assistant Professor in Economics, Purulia, once again welcome you all on the second day of the international webinar on COVID-19 and post-lockdown challenges in respect to economy, health and environment, with special reference to India, conducted by the Department of Economics, Raghunathpur College, Raghunathpur, Purulia. Warm greetings and gracious welcome to our respected panels of experts, other dignitaries, faculty members of different institutions, research scholar, dear students, one and everyone present over here at this virtual platform through Google Meet or YouTube streaming. Now, without wasting time, we directly enter into the technical session. We have three eminent speakers today. Dr. Munmun Haq, Associate Professor, Program Coordinator, BSc HME, Ajman, UAE. Dr. Subir Sen, Assistant Professor at the Department of Humanities and Social Science, IIT Roorkee. Mr. Indrajit Adhikari, Special Representative, Delhi Bureau of Anandabazar Patrika. It may be a mere coincidence. The speaker whom we have got today, there is one point similarity. All of them completed their masters from the Vishwabharati Santiniketan. I feel proud of them, as once upon a time I was also a part of their group. Munmunda, Subidda are 1 year senior to me, and Indrajit or Indro was my classmate and roommate in the Vidyabhavan Boys Hostel at Vishwabharati Santiniketan for long 5 years. And Munmunda also used to stay in the same hostel. Thank you all of them, as because they have responded at my call and found out valuable time for this webinar from their busy schedule. Thank you, sirs. Further, one more announcement. After the
are added to the diagram. On the left-hand side, it's the daily mean confirmed cases per million population. If you look at United States, Chile, Argentina are the top or worst performer. So per thousand, per 1 million population, that's the number of people that are getting affected. And if you look at the right-hand side, it's the number of deaths that's been happening. If you look at Brazil and United States are topping the list, and India is trying to catch it up. South Africa is almost there, but China, Italy, Germany, in terms of containing the death, they are able to reduce it to a certain extent. Now, why is the difference? And of course, each country has their own demography, each country has their own policy obligations, each country had their own economy to look after. And if you try to compare with India with other countries, you'll see that the restriction in India is strict just after China. The restriction were imposed step by step. So lockdown 1, lockdown 2, lockdown 3, lockdown 4. Now, what happened after imposing those lockdown? Probably we are able to contain the spread of the disease to a certain extent. But when the unlockdown started, there is a rapid expansion of the disease. Why we did it? We are going to explain it that as well in the later. Now, why containment less effective in India? So even if we say that like containment was, or as per the government claims, the containments were very much effective. Now, if you look at that, like as a local or as a common people, we believe like what the government is saying or what the political machinery is trying to portray it. So authorities initially say that everything is under control, don't need to worry, we have a lockdown, there would not be any spread of the virus. So everybody was trying to follow the government instruction. So as a result, what happened? Low infection rate, travel bans on foreigners, fully prepared. And in fact, the common people believe the authorities. So what happened? And one more thing, so there is a perception that if you want to say something serious, you need to show that serious intent. So government showed that we are very much serious in tackling the pandemic, and that's why we're putting a heavy restriction. But if you look at like one paper, I was just fine, it's a MBR working paper, Goolsby and Syverson, which says that, of course, lockdown creates some sort of containment in the spread of the virus. Rather, people are more voluntarily choosing to stay at home to avoid the infection. So how much that lockdown creates an impact in containing the virus, as well as people's willingness to voluntarily stay at home, that's debatable. Because as per their findings in 84 countries, they find that the lockdown could contain only 7% of the containment in the virus. So that's very much debatable. Now, there is a stringent lockdown, but still, why it didn't stem inside? Why didn't contain or stem infection? So we say that social distancing. Hello? Hello?
Hello, you are audible.
Yeah.
Please continue. Please continue. You are audible.
Okay.
Clearly audible.
Okay. So say that why it is ineffective in containing, even if there is stringent, as per like stringency index, India states like stay at number 2, but in terms of outcome, it's not that much. Like even if we say that social distancing is one of the major factor in containing the virus, but in India, given that we are too much dependent on public transport. So think about Dharavi in Mumbai. So it's one of the biggest slums in Asia, which shows that how to do it. What's medical facilities? So even if we the lockdown time period gave us an opportunity to boost up our capacity in terms of medical facilities, but we are just sleeping. Recently, there is only 300,000 per day of test now. Of course, the government of India and private players comes up and started producing PPE in large quantities, which helps a lot. We say that like we are not able to follow Vietnam pattern because Vietnam was easily able to contain the death rate, but across the world, the number that Vietnam itself is claiming is very much debatable. So probably they are not revealing the true figures. Of course, the reported case is much, much less compared to other countries. Third thing is household have lower buffers needs income support. The thing is, of course, almost 30 to 40% of Indian population lives on hand to mouth. So unless they have jobs, they are running out of food stock and they need more income support. There is no safety net for the migrant laborers like Colombia, India, those faces. So whatever the reasons, it was a mismanagement by the state and central machinery. Like why? Because lack of policy, transparency and predictability. So someday you are saying this, the next day you are saying this. So there is no transparency and there is no a smooth pattern of predictability. At the beginning, we say that, okay, the migrants needs to stay at their workplace, but there is no facility. The employers are not willing to afford those laborers because the company is the company is closed. Second thing is, first authorities say that we need to stop them, and then they say that we need to transport them to their own villages and cities. And as a result, like those who got infected, they spread the virus in their own localities when they migrated. Bureaucratic mindlessness. What they say is that like private hospitals, super specialty hospitals, they would be transferred into COVID hospitals, but eventually they are not ready because there is no vaccine so far is yet available. Only few anti-malaria kinds of drugs are able to contain the disease. So they change their position today and the next day. Of course, like Indian situation is very much complicated, but can India do better? Of course, they do. Like the Kerala, if you look at the Keralian model, right now in Kerala, I think it's 19,500 is the reported affected people so far. Now, if you look at the picture, like it's very much paining. If you on the left hand side, if you see that the migrant laborers are walking miles, thousands of miles to come back to their home places or villages. And we say that like we are going to keep a social distancing on the right hand side. Look, but they are keeping social distancing in the circles. They keep their sleepers and they are sitting to each other without maintaining a social. So that's like the Indian way of maintaining social distances and like the migrant laborers, because the government didn't do enough to contain the flow of migrant laborers from one place to others. Now, we are going to talk about 7 scenarios. So this is more of a like what happened to or what is the impact of COVID situation in India and across the world. Now, we are going to see how each of us gets affected with the COVID. First one situation. The names are arbitrary names. I just randomly imagine. So if any names get considered with anyone, so don't get offended. It's just my imagination. So Mr. Raghu Shah is a small farmer in Purulia district of West Bengal. He owns 2 acres of land. 2 acres, that means 6 bigha of land. What is the impact of lockdown on him due to COVID-19? So I just borrowed this picture from website. So I should have written down the sources, but I'm saying it like it was borrowed from the website. Scenario number 2, Mr. Deepak Pal is a small-time businessman who runs a small unit for manufacturing egg trays. So we use egg trays like 30. There are 30 holes where 30 eggs could fit in one tray. And like, what would be the impact of? So this is like small scale industry. Lockdown on him. Pallavi Daga is a tour operator who runs a travel outlet. What is the impact of lockdown on her? Sudipta Bose is a professional who works for an international company. He received his salary for the first month of the lockdown, so that means during March, but he is worried about his future. So what would be the life after labor or if your job is gone? 6, the government of a state in India is worried as all revenue because the government earns revenues through GST these days. Now, if the goods and services that are being sold in the market, the goods are not sold. So how the government is going to get taxes? So what the government should do? So that's one of the, so I found this cartoon from Keralian government in a street, painted in a street, and I used it. Last is the daily grocery shop owner by Mr. Santosh Sanyal in Salt Lake in Kolkata. We can see huge rush of people during lockdown. The goods are flying off the shelf very fast. What should he do during this COVID situation? So there are 7 types of situations that as an individual we can face, and we are going to answer these 7 situations one after one through looking at those numbers, facts and figures. We are going to explain it. Now, if you look at the economic environment during the time of COVID situation, so it's severely affected the health sphere and the economic domain. So domestic, there is already COVID situation, there is already a domestic slowdown of output. International recession was coming because international recession comes through every business cycle. Overall, there is an uncertainty. People are not sure what is going to happen. There will be a lack of demand because people want to possess the liquidity in their own hand. So no growth in investment foreseeable. That's one of the biggest major issues. People are not willing. If you look at the foreign direct investment in India, there is in fact like negative growth of foreign direct investment in the last few years. All the 3 pillars of the country badly affected. If you look at like when a country is saying that it's very much strong in its foundation, 3 things that we need to look at. One is private consumption, second is investment, third is external trade. Of course, external trade volume that we have, of course, it's negative, but over the years it's growing. Like if you look at all the countries across the world, except the Nordic countries like Norway, Finland, every country has a negative trade balance. But of course, that negative trade balance, India is trying to improve after the liberalization from 1991, but it's still hugely negative trade balance, but it's improving. Now, there are 3 sectors that constitutes the whole economy: the primary sector, the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector. We are going to see how that lockdown have impacted those sectors one after another. If you look at the primary sector, labor availability. If you look at primary sector normally the agriculture is constituted mostly the agriculture. If you look at the inability of the farmers to access markets for produce, so once the farmers like produce their agriculture products, they need to sell it in the market. But due to lockdown, the markets are the markets are closed, and they need to transport those goods to some of the cities. Because of transportation, they are not able to transport the commodities. Commercial crops have become non-remunerative, rise in labor charges. If you look at, because most of the people who are migrant laborers, they are working in outside the state, and there is a shortfall of laborers. As a result, the price of labor or wage rate becomes increasing, and the production cost increased as well. So commercial crops become very much non-remunerative, lost more than 2/3 of their income. So what happened? Those poor agriculture farmers, their income got reduced by 2/3 of the total income. What happened to the secondary sector? sector. So up to 53% of businessmen have indicated that they have some sort of impact on their operation. And of course, those are negative impact. As per the FICCI survey, stays on the supply chain of essential commodities. Like when you say essential commodity, it could be FMCG product or it could be daily needs. Now, those goods in the cities, mostly they are coming through transportation. Now, if transportation is totally locked up, so there is no train service, there is no truck service, how the goods could be moved from one place to another place? Focused on the production and supply of essential items only. Of course, like in order to survive, the cities as well as the rural areas needs to be dependent on essential, unless we have roti, kapra, makan. So in this case, like we have the food items, the vegetables. So those are given a little bit of leeway in the lockdown period, but not completely. Major companies, if you look at Larsen & Toubro, Fartrog, Ultratech Cement, Grasim, Aditya Birla, Vale, Tata Motors, they all had to suspend their production temporarily. Because of lockdown, no workers were able to travel from their home to workplace, and as a result, those major companies had to temporarily suspend their production. Now, look at what happened to that tertiary sector. So, education, tourism, service sector, so those comes under tertiary sector. If you look at first affected is tourism industry, because tourism depends mostly on movement of people from one country to another or from one place to another. Now, if you look at, as per the estimate, they lost in March and April alone 15,000 crore, 2.1 billion US dollars. The live events or let's say musical shows or parties. So it's a huge industry. They are expected to loss of 3,000 crore plus. Ola and Uber are these days, it's the transportation mode of the middle class population in India. So Ola alone lost 95% of their business in March and April. And obviously, if they are not doing business, they had to lay off the drivers, they had to lay off the people who are working in the back end in telecommunication, back end in the software part. So they had to lay off 1,400 people. Hotels and airlines had to cut salaries because flights are not moving. There's no people in the hotel. So they had to lay off employees and as well as cut down their salaries. Now, what is the GDP growth rate and predictions for 2020? If you look at on the left-hand side, if you look at the financial year and the growth rate in 2015-16, the growth rate was 8%. 16-17, it was 8.3%. 17-18, it was 6. So after 16-17, the growth rate started to fall. 6.6, 6.1. Of course, like even if we are saying these numbers, so these numbers are debatable because government of India changed the base year, and those figures are debatable as well. Now, given that the economy was hit severely due to imposition of the COVID and lockdown, the estimated figure for growth rate in 2020 and 21 is like all are negative. Bernstein, negative 7%, ICRA, negative 5%, Goldman and Sachs, 5%, Nomura is negative 5, Fitch is negative 5, SBI 4.7. So if you look at the estimated figure of for 2020-21, it's negative 0.15% to 7%, negative 7%. So that's the type of impact that we are going to see in this financial year. Now, if you look at how economy could survive, it's based on employment generation. What is the situation that is happening in the last 1 decade and what we are going to see in the upcoming years? So if you look at The growth story that we discussed in the last slide, it's 15, 16, 16, 17, and 17, 18. Even if there is a growth, but in terms of job growth, it's not that much. So between 2012 to 2018, India lost almost 6.1 million jobs, and new jobs are hardly added. Obviously, the government claims that we are going to add 1 crore jobs, new jobs, in addition to the existing one as per the government's claim, but eventually they are not able to do it. So that's one of the hard reality. Unemployment increased from 8.4% in January 2020 to 31% in May. In fact, like the number could how the income has fallen. It fall by 12% in April 2009 to a 48% fall. Someone of mute the mic. I think someone's kids is like crying at home probably. Yeah, thank you. So shows impact of halting activities and consequent loss of livelihoods of millions of households. Taxes. So we say that everything government should do it. How government is going to do it unless they are collecting taxes or they are getting taxes? So revenue generation both in state, because one is state GST, other is central GST, both get accumulated to the government and then government reimbursed to the states. There is no increase. State demanded, and obviously that's why the government has to come up with the relaxing liquor sales norms, because liquor is one of the commodity where government earns the maximum rate of revenue. Central government earns around 2.48 lakhs crores of excise duty on liquor annually on an average. April GST collection was less compared to the projected figure of 1 lakh crore. So which is, of course, Nirmala Sitharaman says that we are hopeful, but the actual numbers are not adding up to the story what she claimed. Now, distressed informal sectors. When you say informal sectors who are not directly involved in as a regular business, in India, 90% of the workforce are part of informal sectors. And if you look at out of 90%, 40 to 50 million, there is a seasonal migration. I said this could be 100 million. It's not like 50. It could be 100 million, but as per the estimates, people are from Bengal, from Orissa, from Jharkhand, from UP, from, let's say, Bihar. They are working in different parts of the country and they work on a daily basis, and sometimes they are paid on a daily cash basis. But because of the lockdown, what happened? Economic activity remains standstill, factories are not running, establishment or business houses are closed, markets are shut, disruption in work, wages and income and food, all three interconnected, affected crores of people in India. Now, we say that like the young India is thriving in startup business, like lots of tech entrepreneurs or like Flipkart or like Myntra.com. So these days, like all those tech, and there are few startups as well who become successful, but eventually they sold their startup to some of the American or Chinese funded companies. Now, what is happening, and we say that make in India, we want to do business. The younger generation is the younger generation has aspiration, and they want to set up their own ventures instead of like working for others. They want to give jobs to others, and that's why startup is a huge buzzword in business field in India in the last 10 years. And I saw some of my students, like in my previous organization, they started their own startup business and eventually one or two become successful, the rest become failed. Why? If you look at the number of young startups have been impacted as funded because the startup needs funds, and who gets and who sponsors those funds? It's the angel investors or let's say MSME sector loans, but those loans are dried up. Secondary is a data labs report shows a 45% decrease in the total growth stage funding. So that is a shortfall of funding by 45% in compared to Q4 with 2019. Stock market. So there are lots of people who are directly or indirectly related with stock markets, but in recent phenomena, the stock market is pretty much volatile. If you look at the BSE Sensex, it's 42,000 in 20th January, but it become less than 30,000 in 8th of April. So there is too much fluctuation. And as a prudent investor, if you see that there is too much volatility in the stock market, you are not readily willing to invest in stock market. So that gives a financial crunch in the stock market, and that's why the index are falling. If you look at the price to earning ratio of Sensex is less than 18, so which is a glaring figure. Normally the figures are 20 to 24 in the last year, and sometimes it reaches the maximum, I think it's 54 in 1993. That's a long time back, but mostly it's 24 or 25 around. What it means that market price of share divided by its earning per share is 17.81. So this doesn't give confidence to the investors. So that's one of the situation. Now, if you look from a government side, what the government is doing and its comparison with other countries. So large difference in fiscal outlays and credit easing. If you look at from the left, India is on the third position. So first Turkey, Mexico, India, Russia, South Africa, Indonesia, France, Argentina, Korea, Spain, Italy, China, South Korea, Canada, United Kingdom, Brazil. So if you look at the blue ones is loans, equity, and guarantees. The red one is additional spending and foregone revenue. If you look at the blue lines, and if you try to compare with some of the countries, with India, the blue lines is only 5% or around less than 5% compared to some of the countries like Italy, France, the loans, equity, because people need money during this situation. And if the government could ease out or government could forget the budget deficit for the time, like instead of like 3.7% of focused rate figure for this year, they could ease it. Like Raghuram Rajan, some of the top economists across the world is saying that forget like this is not your worry factor. Or if let's say some of the credit rating agencies, because if they have to do for all the countries. So they are not going to judge India isolatedly. So the government could have give more loans, equity, and guarantees to small-scale investor, big companies to generate more revenue in the upcoming years. Tourism industry. We said that the tourism and hospitality industry is the biggest hurt due to lockdown. 8,500 crore as per IATO estimates they lost in the last 3 months. Aviation industry is in total doldrums. Indian movie industries. So there are lots of people who are working directly or indirectly. If we say a movie, it's only the film actor or film actress. It's not. There are lots of other people who are indirectly or directly involved. And that could be a loss of 200 to 2,250 crore loss in the last 2-3 months. Auto industry. So if we say that, like, there is a story that as Ford is expanding, the US economy is also expanding. It's the same way or simultaneous way. So if you look at the growth history of Ford, and if you try to match it with US growth history, you are going to find a synonymous effect of business cycle. They are perfectly positively related to each other. So if we look at the Indian scenario at this juncture, you will see that the production was reduced by 240,000 or 2.4 lakhs units, which is 10% of annual production. Loss over 2,300 crores in revenue per day, aggregating up to 48,000 in the 21 days of the first lockdown. And second thing is, people who have money, they have basic financial compulsion. They are not willing to buy cars, or they are postponing their decision to buy a car. Annual sales of light motor vehicles are fallen by 4.2 million units in 2020 as per the latest figure. So 4.20 millions, that means 4 crore almost. That's a lot. Sorry, 42 lakhs. 42 lakhs, that's a lot. And if there is a fall in the auto industry, then you can think of, okay, how many people can get affected in the allied industry, the glass industry, the tire manufacturing industry, the interior designing industry of cars, etc. Everybody. Now, retail sector, like what is the recent impact on the retail sector? So FMCG companies, fast moving consumer goods. So if someone is not familiar with FMCG, it simply means fast moving consumer goods. Companies and retailers are dealing with challenges. There's a huge surge in demand and depletion of inventory. Why? Because if you are locked down, you want to pile up the stocks so that you don't need to go outside. And as a result, the retailers are finding it difficult to comply with the demand and supply. Reduction in workforce, supply chain disruption. So as people are locked down, companies are not supplying, and as a result, there is a shortfall in the supply. So panic into the stockpiling means supermarket shelves are getting quickly empty, and they could have imagined. Because we all know that people respond to those kind of pandemic in a very panic way. You don't know what is going to happen, because we said at the beginning that the policy are not transparent and policies are like implemented haphazardly. So you are not sure what is going to happen. So as a result, it's a reaction to government policies that we respond to those kind of situation very timid and haphazardly. And we try to pile up stocks. Now, of course, there are some good things as well happening. So retailers struggles to deliver orders to the last mile. So some innovative things are being implemented in the online portal. Big Basket, Flipkart tied up with Uber and Swiggy for the last mile delivery of essential commodities. Of course, the precautionary measure as claimed by Uber and Swiggy, they are maintained. Zomato launched a Zomato Market service to deliver groceries from retail stores. ITC is partnering with Domino's Pizza for zero contact delivery of Ashirvad brand of atta and spices. FMCG players like HUL, Godrej, ITC have restarted production of essential commodities in their selected plants. All, of course, there is at a much reduced capacity. Logistics sector. So logistics sector is the hardest hit, whether you talk about bus, railway, taxi, airplane, everybody was the hardest hit. Output in factories decreases, and as a result, there is few number of trucks which would be plying in the roads. So the drivers, the truck owners, they are facing a financial crunch. C as well. Export, as like the world economy become volatile, export and imports in trade is kind of getting affected, and as a result, C activity is also affecting. And second thing is people are not working. People are mostly, wherever possible, is working from home. So there is a delay in customs and clearance. And as a result, what is happening? The cargo is not able to leave on time. Whatever the cargo that are allowed. Rail freight has been affected completely. Government measures. So we say that like the government is the one who should take the initiative to measure. Like what are the different measures government? I just like roughly talk about few numbers. Government said that at the beginning they said that the 40 crore people would not be hungry. But in reality, we see in some of the newspaper clippings, in newses, that it's a claim by the government, but in reality, those are not the fact that is matches with the government claims. They say that 80 crore people would not be hungry until November 2020. After what? After that. Extra funds for healthcare and for the states. That's all right. Sector relative incentive. Each sector was given some sort of incentive that was discussed by the finance minister in her 5-day speech or 5-day discussion. Tax deadline was extended. That's a good thing. Economic relief for the poor over 170,000 crore was given to the poor. RBI announced package of 374 crores package to the country's financial system. In order to protect Indian companies, the government restricted foreign direct investment or in favor of, changed the policy in favor of Indian companies. That's a good thing as well, I would say. The Department of Military Affairs, all capital acquisition postponed because given that, like, except the Chinese counterparts that are too much engaged in some military talk these days, but as far as every country is battling in their own economy or trying to survive their own way, there is no time for war right now, even like Pakistan and India. So the government said that because the procurement of defense materials is very expensive. So right now, government of India postponed it. The last one is PM announced the economic package of 20 lakh crores, which is almost 10% of GDP. If we believe the figure of 2.2 as per last 2.2 trillion last year's or 2.37 the recent year's GDP estimate. But if you look at the 2 lakh crores, out of 2 lakh crores, actually, in reality, it's less than, I think, 1.4, no, yeah, 5 or 6 lakhs crores was only meant as an economic package. The rest are given by the RBI or some of the policies or some of the announcement are already announced in the budget. So even if they are saying 20 lakh crores, I doubt that number for as an economic package. But at the bright side of the pandemic, like there are few sectors or few areas which took that opportunity and try to excel or try to even improve further. Digital and internet economy, they thrived well in this pandemic. Online skill development. So people sitting at home, they started to increase their skills through online program. Online grocery stores, they increase digital contents. People are these days consuming digital content. Pharmaceutical industries, especially chemicals, and the lastly is Atmanirbhar Bharat. Of course, Last time Prime Minister said that make in India, but this Atmanirbhar Bharat, hopefully this would be much more successful and it can counter the Chinese grow in Indian counterpart in Indian economy. So what are the, like, given all this, what are the general suggestion we can give is improve demand by injecting more liquidity. Like why I'm saying it is because given that right now we don't have money, and if we don't have money, we are going to die out of hunger. And unless we demand, there would be no supply. Now, if you look at, like, as per economic theory of demand and supply, there is always a gap or time lag between demand and supply. Once you demand it, the supply comes after one period lag. That one period could be 1 week, it could be 1 day, it could be 1 month, it could be 1 season, it could be half year, it could be 1 year. So unless right now you need to create demand, and how you can create demand in the economy, just artificially create money, pump money in the economy. So one of the way it could be universal cash transfer. Okay, whoever is poor right now, this is not the time to look at, okay, someone is below poverty line, someone is above poverty line, someone is middle class. Just give money so that they can buy goods. Unless there is a demand in the market, the economy will take time to revive. Incentivize the corporates for capital expenditure. Now, capital expenditure is trying to build up industry, trying to set up trying to establish new setups. So unless you give them incentive, give them tax credit, give them like free moratorium, etc. Because if you think for the time being that I am going to lose this much amount of money, then it will be too late when the economy would fall even much more recession. Build into infrastructure. Try to give national employment guarantee schemes in the line of MNREGA. So that's one of the. Second thing is give collateral free loan. Whenever we say that, like when I was like doing applying for PhD, some of the universities say that you need to take loans because we are not going to give you first year tuition fee. So even if it's the government said that the foreign education loan would be collateral free, like, do you know what the bank does? The bank is going to say that submit your land document or property document or let's say fixed deposits in the bank, and you are doing it intentionally, that if in case I am default, then the bank has the authority to take those properties. And bank is not saying it's mandatory, it's a provision. So what they are actually doing, even if it's not written in the books, they are saying that submit some form of collaterals. So even if in pen and paper, it's very good, but in reality, the banks or the financial institutions is not following it. So what the RBI needs to do, they need to give strict guideline. If someone is not following, there will be a strict or severe penalty. The RBI is trying to cut the repo rate, and of course, the benefits of the repo rates needs to go to the customer. When you say customer, it's the borrowers. That means low interest rate and etc. to those who are borrowing from bank. Reduce income tax and corporate tax. Simplify GST. Now we have like 5 slabs of GST: 0%, 5%, then 12%, 18%, and 28%. So 5 slabs. So make it simple and try to be as simple and try to put a tax slab. So the last time Nirmala Sitharaman said that we are give you tax breaks to those population who have less than 5 lakh, and there are 2 types of. So eventually, so those who are above 5 lakhs, and every Indian consumer who says that I want to save for my, I want to buy health policy, I want to invest, or I want to build a house, and eventually it's not. I tried to calculate last year, and eventually it's not beneficial at all. So what if they say that, okay, in terms of numbers, sometimes like what it reflects, in reality, it's not the true picture. So try to be honest with your stakeholders and pass this message to all the population in the country. Thank you. I think I took almost 1 hour. My question answer sessions like try to be cut down a little bit.
Thank you, Dr. Munmun Haq, sir, for such informative discussion. We have few questions in the chat box. One of them, Shunjit Kundu, he asked, would we think the Atmanirbhar Bharat package boost the Indian economy and Indian towards self-reliant?
Okay. So, like if we say Atmanirbhar, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to whatever. Like it's not the primitive types of society. Like whatever you are going to produce and you are going to consume. So, what Atmanirbhar simply means that like we should try to reduce the dependency on others. Lots of things which we could have produced. Like think about PPE kits. We used to import PPE kits from China and some other countries. Now we are ourselves are able to produce the PPE kits. So given a situation, if we could focus, the dependency on our foreign counterparts could be limited. So that's one of the things what Atmanirbhar means. So I hope that I was able to answer his question.
Okay. He also asked how to ensure the sustainable economy of lower middle income country during the COVID-19 pandemic, like Bangladesh, Bhutan, Cambodia, etc.
Okay, good. Now, like what happened, if we look at across the world, affected each and every country, like almost 187 countries, there are few countries only left, out of which the government sets each year in the budget that we are going to contain our fiscal deficit to, let's say, 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%. Now, given that the people are losing jobs, they don't have any other means to survive. Unless they have money. Now, what government could do, the government could, for the time being, pump in money, let's say 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, money to those pocket, those people, and let them buy, let them survive, forget about, for the time being, fiscal deficit. So that's one of the provision. And of course, government needs to take into account, like invest in infrastructure sector, which can drive the economy in the long time. So now, like government needs to forget about budget deficit and need to support the people who are under stress due to this lockdown and COVID situation.
Okay, thank you, sir. Another question from Susmadip Bhakot. How can the industrial sector grow in this situation?
Okay, so what happened? And like if you look at the Indian industry, like some of the top players, they have money, but the thing is, like due to lockdown, they were not able to operate in their full capacity. Second thing is, people are kind of spendthrift. So people do not willing to buy. So they want to save a little bit more because you don't know what is going to happen in the future. So now the thing is, unless there is a demand side boost, so unless people try to buy, there would not be supply, because we always say that there is supply and demand, there is 1 period lag. So unless there is a demand side push, the Indian industry will face it difficult because the goods that are already being produced is not sold in the market. So you need to create demand, first thing. Second thing is you need to say that, okay, we need to be more competitive with the rest of the world. So I was just like reading a blog. So in China, there's one investor who set up his, one Indian investor from Bangalore who set up his industry in China, and everything from buying the land, looking the land, everything was done in 3 days. So if you look at Indian, even if we are saying that it's ease of doing business like those names, but in reality, it takes months to set up a business in India. Like if I have money and if I are given an opportunity to do business in China or Vietnam or Cambodia or Congo or any other country, why I should not go? If we say that we are not patriotic, forget about for patriotism. I want my money and I want to do business and I want to earn more money. So unless governments is giving them enough facilities, they are not going to do it. Second thing is you need to increase the demand by pumping more money in the system. That's it. Pralay, you are not audible.
Okay. Now.
Okay. So any more questions?
One question. Reducing tax rate may lead to fiscal deficit. How can manage it?
Right.
And one question, and another question is, during the lockdown period, or not only lockdown period, before the lockdown period, India has huge jobless youth. How can solve this problem?
Okay. So the first problem is related to tax revenue. So if you reduce the tax rate, there would be a shortfall of tax. Of course, there will be more people who is willing to pay taxes. If I know that, so if you could recall, there is one policy was introduced by when P. Chidambaram was finance minister. He said that those who have black money, they deposit their black money and take, let's say, 70% of the money and it would be get white. So like what I'm trying to say is that if you know that you are hardworking people and you are willing to, let's say, if you think of except the salaried person, how many people of India who does regular grocery business and everything pay taxes? None. So if you can motivate them, okay, the tax is very much less, and you will feel that, okay, the burden is not that much, and those taxes could be used. So if you reduce the tax rate, of course, it's a double-edged sword. The government needs to think about the revenue. On the other side, the people needs to think about, okay, if the rates was less, how many people will going to get covered under the scheme? So the government needs to do a balance, and I still think like present day tax structure in India is still complicated and still on the higher side. Of course, not like USA, but still on the higher side. And the second question is, what is that?
Joblessness of the people.
Okay. Like if you look at the Indian pre-COVID situation, the growth rate was falling, the unemployment rate was rising. So I think it's from a policy perspective, and coupled with the COVID situation, the situation even gets worse. Now, what the government could do now is public investment. So that's one thing. Public investing in terms of road infrastructure, and forget about for the time being budget deficit. That's one thing. Second thing is those who want to set up their own business, try to incentivize them so that could create more jobs in the economy. So those are the two things that government could do, because government is too much worried that some of the ratings like Fitch or the other rating agencies is going to downgrade or give a negative remark on India's economy. This is not the time to think about negative, because almost across the world, the situation is like this. Every country has suffered. And if you look at like that, I would say this one. Yeah. If you look at this diagram, some of the countries like Italy, United Kingdom, France, Japan, Germany. So look at like loans, equity, and guarantees, like how much of the government gave, and look at what is happening to India. The proportion is much, much higher to those countries, and accredited and spending and foregone revenue. How much there is a foregone revenue? If you look at compared to India and some of the other countries, India is much tiny person. So we could, of course, probably we don't have that much financial liberty compared to some of the developed countries, but still we could do much better in terms of spending. That could create jobs in both formal and informal sector. Hello? Pralay, can you hear me?
Hello, thank you, Dr. Hawk. Thank you very much for your lucid presentation, and you touch each and every sector of our economy. And not only that, you also answered all the questions raised by our participant. Thank you very much on behalf of the organizing committee, and thank you very much from myself also. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Now we move. Now I would like to introduce our second invited speaker of the day, whose name, fame, and achievements at this tender age is a matter of envy to many budding economists. He is Dr. Subir Sen, Assistant Professor at the Department of Humanities and Social Science, IIT Roorkee. Dr. Subir Sen, at present working as an Assistant Professor at the Department of Humanities and Social Science, Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee. He completed his master degree from Viswabharati Santiniketan. Then he completed his PhD from the Institute of Social Science and Economic Change, Isaac, Bengaluru. He has more than 10 years of teaching experience. Before joining to the IIT Roorkee, he taught at Madras School of Economics, Chennai, Terry University, New Delhi from 2008 to 2014. His area of interest are advanced microeconomics, risk participation, risk perceptions, industrial organization, study of Indian insurance industry, climate change adaptation, disaster risk reduction, applied econometrics, modeling issues in economics. He received many awards from the different institutions. If you are first prize in Japanese award for outstanding research on development by 16th annual Global Development Conference, Global Development Network. Subsidy for PhD thesis from Geneva Association internationally for the economic assurance. Scholarship and initiative invitation for third meeting in economic science, meetings of Nobel laureate, Lindo Nobel laureate meeting, Lindo, Germany. His 7 journal articles, 3 working papers, and 1 special report have been published by different national and international publishing houses. 6 major research projects either completed or going on under his supervision, which are funded by different national and international funding agencies. Few students already registered under him for their PhD. Now, may I request Dr. Subir Sen to share his view with us. Dr. Subir Sen, sir.
So, very good afternoon, Pralay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you are audible clearly.
Okay, and can you see my slide? Because I cannot please see my slide.
Yeah, it is also visible.
Is it in full screen or?
Full screen. Not.
It is full.
Into. Yeah, it is full screen now.
It is full screen now, right?
Okay.
Okay, okay. So, first of all, thank you for inviting me for this. This. I would rather say it's an interaction because whatever we say about COVID, I think nothing is conclusive in any way because the world is actually seeing unprecedented times. Um, Rather than calling me Sir or Dr. Subir, I will be happy if you call me Dada because uh, and you happen to be in a college where I visited long back. I'm myself from Burnpur, so I have been to Raghunathpur College a couple of times. I remember. Okay. Anyway, so I don't know what to say because Munmun has covered more or less everything, and as the current situation is, the macroeconomists are playing a bigger role than the microeconomists. So I really do not know how to begin or how to put forth the arguments. And I don't have a very elaborate presentation to share with all of you. Because Proloy asked me to talk about the environmental implications of COVID-19, so I thought of giving this subtitle that is it the way to solve environmental problems without any action? Because frankly speaking, we are not doing anything. Whether we as individuals, we as households, we as communities, we as governments or authorities, we are not doing anything. But we are seeing that there are some positive benefits being accruing to the environment. So is this the way that we really wish the world should correct itself, the environment should correct itself, or is there is another aspect to this particular story? We already know that that there are a lot of macroeconomic problems. So I am in particular not interested in jumping into the macro problems as such. Please excuse me 1 minute. I think somebody is banging my door. There is a meeting going on. Okay. My apologies. There is someone in the office. So anyway, so let me go to the first slide that I have. If you look at the scientific arguments that are being put forth, so there are various kind of apprehensions or forecast with regard to the impact of COVID on the environment and health and individuals, and therefore on the livelihood pattern, etc. Right? So it is well accepted that that this has affected livelihoods in some way or the other. So if you look at the sectors that we have in our economy, the three sectors, the primary, secondary, and the tertiary sector. So we are under the impression that the primary sector is possibly not much affected, the secondary sector is, and the tertiary sector again, which we say as the service sector, is again not much affected because the mode of operation is actually shifted from operating from offices to operating from home. Now, of course, as an economist, we always will argue whether this is the most efficient way of doing it, most productive way of doing it. So these arguments will continue for some time, and I think people will come out with very objective research in this direction. But let us talk about the primary sector, for example, the agricultural sector. Is it true that the agricultural sector is really benefiting? If you look at the developments that took place following COVID and the issues regarding I would rather use the term not fully dependent on state authorities. So this was the perception. So because you said that I work in the area of this perception, so the psychological factors to a certain extent drove out labor from labor scarce region in our country. And therefore, the primary sector is one sector that is out to be affected because of quality, etc., they have actually improved significantly. And that is supposed to actually, increase human wealth. Today or yesterday, I remember to have read a paper which says that there is a study being conducted in India which shows that because of improvement in air quality, the transmission of COVID-19 has actually diminished, or it has lowered. Now, how far it is true, whether this is a very localized phenomena or not, these are things that needs, deeper probe. But at this particular moment, it is true that there is, reduction in air quality. There is improvement in overall PM index of the air, and therefore some of the factors that were actually contributing to the concerns of global climate change seems to be under control, at least temporarily or in the short run. Now, there are studies which have been conducted in China. I will be sharing some of the pictures with you, which shows that the Chinese cities have improved, tremendously. The pollutants level have come down. There is a specific study that was conducted in the Ghaziabad. Ghaziabad is known as the most polluted city in the country. So they took up the Ghaziabad city as a case study for the national capital region, and they initially start with the assumption that, let us assume that this COVID lockdown is actually going to bring down the pollutants in the atmosphere, and it is going to help, eradicate some of the health-related problems that are directly attributed to the environmental quality overall. Initially, the research proceeded in the direction, and it suggests that it is going to corroborate with the null hypothesis and therefore reject the alternative hypothesis. But the study is very interesting. It says that, look, as long as we behave the way we are behaving, things are not going to change much. So it also reflects the way in which the lockdown has been handled and the way people have reacted to the lockdown. So there has been very minimal impact on release of these pollutants in the atmosphere, and therefore the status quo is maintained. So this study by Lokhandwala and Gautam is very interesting. It is completely, it is completely against what is expected and what the studies from the developed countries or even some of the developed countries are actually showing, that lockdown has helped reduction in pollutants. Now, why these pollutants will come down in cities? Some of you may wonder as to what is happening. You see, the transportation sector is one of the biggest contributor to these pollutants. Whatever you can think of, NO2, SO2, O3, blah blah blah. But another sector that contributes to this particular problem or the crisis is the infrastructure sector, the building sector. And therefore there has been a lot of talk of circular economy, how to reuse building materials, blah blah blah. So we were actually going forward towards an economy where we would like to reduce the waste by reusing the waste. Now what has happened is that this entire activity has come down. So the entire activity has stopped. So therefore the rise in the pollution levels has automatically stopped. But if you look at the vehicular pollution, unfortunately, this is not so. At least in the NCR region. So more or less, you will see that vehicular pollution is still there. More or less, it is there. Okay. There are again encouraging pictures from USA, Italy, and Spain, and there are reports which says that the environmental quality has actually increased. So more or less, if you look at the scientific community and the way they are using the satellite imagery or real-time data, or they are collecting data from government agencies to map how the air quality, water quality, etc. is changing over a period of time, it shows that there is improvement and parameters of any kind of environmental quality is actually improved during this lockdown period. Okay, so am I clear? Is there any question at this particular moment? So if you really want to know about what are these parameters are, you can directly get in touch with me, and I can share papers which will be useful for you to look through and analyze. Okay, so let's just look at some of the beautiful pictures that I said these are pictures that came out from these different studies. I'm quite sure that if drone pictures would have been taken for major cities, say for example the town from where I come from, Asansol and Banpur, it's an industrial belt. I know the level of pollution that is there. So if we could have taken a drone shot of the entire steel city, or even Durgapur for that matter, where there are many thermal power plants actually on both the side of the river, So you have the Meiji on this side, you have DSP on the other side. If we could have taken a picture, we would have got, even more better impression about the lockdown and its impact on the environment. How the fly ash problem, the smog, the black air, all these problems has actually come down. Nevertheless, so this is a study done in China, and they started with Wuhan. So this is a picture from Wuhan. So if you see, the panel A is the business as usual scenario, taken sometime in the morning, and panel B is the lockdown period. So you see that there are no road, there is absolutely no traffic on the road. The roads are completely empty. So therefore, the air quality is out to be much better. And also, if you look at the river water quality, though it is not so clear from this particular image, but the author says that even if one wants to investigate the quality of the river water, then possibly there will be a lot of improvement. So you may come across many nutrients which were completely missing, or were contaminated in the business as usual scenario. So this is another picture where they say that this is the heart of the city of Wuhan. So again, panel A is the business as usual scenario. Panel B is when nothing is operational. So this is the railway station in Wuhan. So from where the picture has been taken, right? Some of the interesting parameters that the authors considered were so you can see the PM25, NO2, CO. PM10, the PM2.5 and PM10 are one of the major culprits in Delhi and the NCR region. So they are very bad for people who have asthmatic tendencies, pneumonia, and actually the COVID kind of problem, aggravates because of higher presence of PM2.5 and PM10. So again, SO2, O3. So these are, you see, these have actually come down. So they have taken data for 2 different periods, and they have compared, and they found out that almost every parameter is coming down. You see, this is for Wuhan. So they show that every parameter is coming down in this city. Now, the reason why I am actually using Wuhan as a case in forward, because we all assume that this is something that has emanated from Wuhan. So we should also know how things have shaped up in Wuhan. Okay. So this is, another study. So the study that I referred to by Mohammed et al. Earlier. So this is their study where they have used GIS map, and they have used data for 2 different periods. So you see, the first data was captured during the period 1st to 20th of January, and the second is 10 to 25 February, when the lockdown was imposed in China in some of the parts. So China had a very different way of addressing lockdown, or stopping economic activity. So you see that the NO2 emissions have actually come down. And what are the major contributors of NO2 emission? The major contributors are actually the electricity generating plants, the plants which use a lot of coal fire. The consumption of coal actually came down in China, and China is one of the major consumer of coal. So you can now, go back. So if the consumption of coal is coming down, that means demand for coal is coming down. That means the demand for the coal resource is coming down. Therefore, mining activities will be coming down, and there are a lot of additional environmental impacts that come with coal mining and other forms of mining. So therefore, if you even look at one particular sector, that is electricity generation for, say, for example, manufacturing or any kind of economic productive activity. So if that demand comes down, then automatically it will be better for the environment. So there is no need for you to break head or think about rocket science to prove it. It is quite simple. One can easily understand it if you understand basic economics. So this picture clearly shows that NO2 has actually, the emissions have actually come down, and the air quality has actually improved in China. Let us move closer, come to India. So I was talking about this paper by Lokhandwala and Gautam. So they actually also, considered data for different time period, and they mapped this data and they looked into the satellite imageries that were available from ESA. Now, if you look at this picture again, it is very clear that during the lockdown period, and even if if you take the peak lockdown periods, that is the time between April to May or maybe April to June, you will see that even these red dots will not be there, because these were the areas which were left aside. If you look at the map, the fourth map, if you can follow the arrow, so this is the part of Chhattisgarh. So this is more or less Chhattisgarh. And if you look at the COVID trends, then you will see that very interestingly, parts of Chhattisgarh, eastern part of Madhya Pradesh, western part of Orissa, southern part of Jharkhand, to a certain extent, few districts in the southern part of Uttar Pradesh, these were the areas which were not affected. Even today, if you look at the map, you will see that this is the area where the frequency or severity of COVID is not that high. But these are mineral-rich areas. These are resource-rich areas. So these are areas where all these activities are still ongoing. So even when there was lockdown, this area was still, releasing some level of NO2 because of the kind of economic activity that was concentrated in this particular area. Okay. So, but even if you take, if you take the satellite imageries after April, then you may find out that these are still exaggeration. These red dots will possibly vanish. We don't have any proof to show you. Now, remember, I was talking about the same paper, and they have collected data for Ghaziabad city to show that how the pollutant trends have actually come down. So, if you see, it is true that in the initial phase, it actually came down. If you see PM 2.5 and PM 10, so these are the two major culprits. So for bad health. So if you look at the trends, you see that initially they have come down, but suddenly they have picked up. Okay, so as and how we as individuals adapted to lockdown, we tried to find out our own ways to negotiate with the rules and regulation. Okay, we started using our own personal vehicles, or more and more vehicles were put on the road because to help those who wanted to move out from their places of work to places of origin and so on and so forth. So there were various reasons why government had to relax the travel norms and travel restrictions. You see that at least in Ghaziabad area, so it's a very small example. Some of the trends actually reversed. If you see the PM10 for that matter, the blue line actually drops. So this is for 2020. So if you see, it actually comes down and then it reverses. So if you look at SO2, there is, again, there was a sharp reduction. Again, it came back to the same level. Okay. So these are, so again, here you see the green line is 2020. So I don't know how come this study didn't use the same color pattern for all the different years, but so one needs to be very, very careful while interpreting the graph. So here in this case, the green line is 2020, but here in this case, the blue line is 2020. So one needs to be very, very careful by interpreting these graphs. Okay. So, but you see that it comes down and again, it actually goes back. Okay. So this was a study done by Lokhandwala and Gautam 2020. Now you must have seen reports that Himalayas is visible from Bihar, Himalayas is visible from Jalandhar. The air quality is improved in such a way that there were some Photoshop pictures which actually showed that somebody from Delhi can actually see the Himalayas. But some of them were actually fake. But in reality, actually, air quality improved. So this is again taken from another study by Sadat et al. In another journal. So they actually show that how air quality has improved in different cities, in densely populated cities, whether you talk of Paris, New Delhi, Taipei or New York. So in more or less every place, you see that, the air quality has actually improved. So this is the, last slide or the second last slide where I would like to spend more time. Now, as an economist, how do we interpret these scientific arguments or the scientific observations that the environmental quality indicators are actually improving? Is it good? Now, as an economist, we have to always think about equity, efficiency, and welfare. Now, let me first go to efficiency. Is this the most efficient way to achieve or improve environmental quality? Of course not. Because in environmental economics, there is something called social welfare benefit and social welfare, social marginal benefit and social marginal cost. Sorry, please, excuse me for this, mistake. So we have, the social marginal cost and the social marginal benefit. Now, of course, if the social marginal cost is much, much higher than the social marginal benefit, then we would not value the benefits in that great way. In this particular case, with reference to COVID-19, this is exactly what has happened. And therefore, many environmentalists and environmental economists, ecological economists, ecologists, they're all facing a similar kind of a dilemma. For example, we live very close to the pilgrimage town of Haridwar. And all of you know that people come to Haridwar to take the holy dip. We recently had this month of Shravan, and it becomes really difficult for us to travel during this month of Shravan that recently went by. Because before Shivratri, the entire roads, everything will be choked because people will come to take water. Now this time, apparently, everything is under lockdown. Okay, there are no tourists in Haridwar. Nobody is coming and disturbing the serene environment over there. There were reports saying that the water quality has improved. Okay, now these are only media reports. Fine. So we actually proposed that we would like to do a study to check whether the air quality has, water quality has actually improved or not. So let me make it even more precise. So we wanted to know whether the water quality between Rishikesh to Har Ki Pauri has increased or not. Okay. So if it is increasing, it is good, because Ganges has its own Ganges water has its own qualities of purification. There are bacteriophages and so on and so forth, and because of pollution, etc., people have been complaining that the purity of river Ganges, even because of the construction of dams, small hydroelectric projects, etc., people have been criticizing that these development efforts have actually, diluted the purity of Ganges water. So the point is, if lockdown is actually improving the quality, then the quality should improve from between a particular stretch. So we wanted to do this study. Now, we wanted to do this study with a team of economists, hydrologists, water scientists, water resource management specialists, so on and so forth. But then at the same time, we were it was brought to our attention and note that the entire Sitkul region, the Sitkul region is next to Haridwar. It is the State Industrial Development Undertaking Limited, where many small and large scale, there is one large scale industry, that is BHEL, PHEL is there. All the production units were actually closed. Okay, everything was closed. So hotels are closed, restaurants are closed, transportation, the entire business or the entire activity in Haridwar and the adjoining district is based on tourism. The entire tourism activity is closed. Nobody is earning any money. Everybody is jobless. Now, in this condition, if I as an economist say, look, the air quality, water quality has improved, okay, and I don't take into account the social cost of improving this water quality, then what kind of policy message I will be giving, right? So therefore, we step back and we didn't want to do this kind of an analysis, because we clearly see that in this particular case, the social cost is much, much higher than the social benefit. So definitely, we do not want such kind of an efficient system where we are not able to make everybody better off by making none worse off. Here, actually, we are making a huge section of the population worse off. Okay, but coming back to what has happened to the environment has improved. Okay, but as an economist, do I need to feel happy about this? Of course not. Okay, next is equity. Okay, now is it a equitable distribution? Fine. I hope all of you know that the Honorable Supreme Court and by statute, Ganga river is actually compared to an individual. It's a living individual. It's a living entity. So anybody harming river Ganga could be taken to court, and there could be actions against that individual or industry and so on and so forth. So if you look at from that perspective, okay, probably it's a equitable distribution in favor of the river, which was so far speechless, right? And probably this is true for many. It is true for the reserve forest, where people were going for recreational purposes, and often the animals would have been disturbed, which we never knew. Okay, the flora and fauna would have been affected, which we never cared about, because we wanted to have our own share of fun. And as economy improves, as we become more and more developed, our wealth improves, we want more and more such kind of recreational services. So we demand more and more recreational services. We are ready to pay for these recreational services. So if you happen to come to Gym Corporate during the peak season, you will see that there is huge rush to enter the park and to enjoy the environment. But we never cared about how this large population visiting this environment is going to affect the flora and fauna or the biodiversity of this particular place. But this COVID-19 has given this opportunity that the flora and fauna and the biodiversity could at least regain back to some acceptable levels, which was not possible earlier. Okay. So, and finally, welfare. Whose welfare are we looking at? If you look at individual welfare, well, I will say I am not happy, because I am not able to go and visit these parks. I am not able to visit Haridwar. I am not able to do my day-to-day activities because I am being restricted heavily. But if you look at it from the long-term perspective, so that's where we need to go back to the Brundtland Commission report, where the first word for sustainability was imprinted or mentioned. So if you look at the sustainability, the definition of sustainability, I think this is the best way in which you can actually ensure intergenerational welfare. Okay, so we are delaying it, but we are actually bettering it off. So COVID in that sense could be also a positive thing, in a way that it is actually helping you to realize the notion of sustainability. I will come back to that little later on. So this is all about equity, efficiency, and welfare. I didn't want to put slides over here, or I didn't want to elaborate these things, because I hope that some of you really have interest in economics and you understand these basic concepts, so that it will be easier for you to interpret it from the point of view of the environment and the economy interlinkages. In economics, there is a theory which called destructive destruction theory. I also happen to be, working in the area of disaster. My major work, if you browse Google, if you see the kind of work that I do, I actually look into the economic implications of disaster and climate change. There we have a term called creative destruction, which is a Schumpeterian concept, right? Now, what in very simple word, what does this actually mean? Now, you see, when a disaster happens, there are two groups of people. One, those who are affected very badly, and they're very sad because they have lost everything. There is another group of people who also have faced a similar kind of a situation or a similar kind of consequences, but they probably are not sad. Why? Because their perception is very, very different. They perceive disaster as a chance to rebuild, and probably rebuilding will happen in a much better way than the way cities were being built, without any planning, without anything. So if you look at, the historical events, the major disasters that happened in our country, as well as outside, more so in Japan, more so in Korea, in US. So if you look at the major disaster events, you see major rebuilding has taken place. Let me give you a very simple example. In Japan, there are many places where you have sea walls, right? When we were in school, we were taught that there is a country which actually settles below, on an average, the sea level. Which is that country? We all know that that country is Holland or Netherlands. So they built an infrastructure in such a way that they could actually cope and adapt to floods, right? They have one of the world's best engineering infrastructure facilities to take care of floods. Japan also took care of, sea surges and, the inundation that will happen because of rise in the sea level. But nobody knew before this dreaded tsunami that what should be the height of the seawall. So now there are some estimates. So now there are many countries which have faced tsunami. There are different intensity and severity of tsunami. So now we have data in front of us in such a way that we can model and project as to what should be the optimal height of the sea wall, if we need to invest on that. Because if we need to invest on this kind of mitigation or adaptation measures, then we need to take out money from our day-to-day activity and put it there. Okay, so it will have a fiscal implication, right? But this also gives you a chance to create. So therefore, destruction often helps you to recreate or create completely new thing. For example, COVID, like the earlier speaker was saying, that it has created a lot of possibilities. You see, the e-commerce has actually boomed. You see, work from home has actually gone up. You see the energy consumption. If you take into account the number of offices running in business as usual scenario, then how many offices are running? What is the amount of energy consumption? Today we are consuming probably less. We are all operating from our home. Okay, so these are some of the positive things that could happen out of a disaster, right? So if you look at it from the point of view of the creative the destruction perspective, or the Schumpeterian perspective, or the entire school of thought that believes this perspective, then COVID is something that is going to help rebuild, rethink, reconstruct. Okay, so we need to now understand natural hazard. Now, what has happened, unfortunately, is that everybody is talking about COVID and impact of COVID. We did a study, we found out that there are disasters, and disasters will have different kind of implications on the macroeconomy. For example, if there is a flood, then the severity of flood will determine whether there will be reduction in GDP or not. Okay, if there is a drought, how the drought is going to affect the GDP. We found out drought will not affect GDP, because drought will only affect agricultural GDP, and the farmers are now wise enough to look for non-farm activities so as to compensate the loss in income from agriculture, and therefore the agricultural losses will be met up by some other activity or the other. Okay, so even in disaster case, we do not have a direct estimate as to if this disaster happened, this is the loss in GDP. Suddenly, there are many epidemiologists in the market, and they are projecting this is going to happen, that is going to happen. Well, we know what is going to happen. If there is no water, there will be no agriculture. We know productivity loss will be there. Okay, but the numbers will also depend on what kind of infrastructure you are creating, what kind of enabling environment you are creating. So we need to learn from natural hazards. We need to learn from the extreme events, and thereby, take into account the Schumpeterian view and see how these events have actually helped different states, different regions, different localities. For example, today we say Odisha is much better equipped because of its recurring experience with disaster management. Okay, so this is really interesting, because if we consider so, then really these past experiences have helped Odisha to prepare better and prepare well. Next are the global climate change concerns, environmental degradation, and economic impact. Of course, these are things that for the time being will take a backseat, because the emissions are low. There are many reports which are saying that the emissions are low. You see, the major contributor of emission, you will be surprised to know, it is the aviation industry. The aviation industry is completely under hold. Okay, there are taxes. If you fly to Europe, you need to pay additional taxes. So there are no emissions now, there are no taxes now. So therefore, the concerns that we have with regard to emissions for the time being are on hold, or they have taken backseat. Very recently, the government has come out with the new environmental policy. How many of you have read? We don't know, but the government is on a massive exercise to reform and initiate new policy measures for different sectors. The environmental policy is one such. So environmental degradation. What is environmental degradation right now? What kind of degradation are we talking of? Of course, there are degradation that are happening in some places. For example, in the hill regions, right now there are many areas which are suffering from landslides. Few months back, when the heat stress was going on, there were many areas which faced forest fires. Unfortunately, there was not enough manpower. There was not enough authoritarian, directions to stop this kind of disaster. So it had some implications on the environment. But overall, if you look at environmental degradation from the perspective of mining, quarrying, and all the kind of activities, economic activities, they are now on hold. So therefore, again, this is good for the environment. The The sustainability issues, again, probably has taken a back step. But I personally feel that if you look at some of the UN development goals that were being identified, some of them are also there in our country. We have already implemented in a nice way. So if you look at the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, if you look at the universal healthcare facility, whether it is the insurance scheme or the service provisioning scheme, now these were some efforts that were they are actually helping you now. Because we are now talking about a cleaner city, we are talking about a cleaner neighborhood. So we already have started some policies. Probably some will say that, okay, you did it because you had to align with the UN goals. But well, we did it. And possibly these are something that are going to help in the long run. Making the municipal corporations, the city corporations much more Atmanirbhar. Not Atmanirbhar in the notional sense, but in the real sense, making them more and more independent, decentralize these organizations as much as possible. Don't worry about finance. Finances are there. If you look at the municipal finances, you will be very, very surprised to know that most of the funds go back. They are not utilized. So again, it goes back to equity, efficiency, and welfare issues. So we are not equitable in our distributions. We are not efficient in our utilization of funds or activities, and therefore we don't improve our welfare. But if you look at the policies that are there and the finances that are being plowed to these different agencies, things are in the right direction. UNDRR, there is something called Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and today we are actually talking about unifying climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. So if you consider COVID as a disaster, so the UNDRR guidelines will help you to understand that how to handle such kind of a disaster, and how your environment is going to create an enabling situation so that you can fight with such kind of situation in a much better way, in a much efficient way. Of course, there are country-specific initiatives. I don't want to go into that because some of the initiatives Moon has already talked of. I really don't want to go into the macro aspect, the policy aspect, so on and so forth. I want to remain micro as much as possible. Before I end my presentation, I would just like to bring some parallels over here. The 9/11 incident changed the way many companies operated or many businesses operated. If you look at the insurance companies, before 9/11, if you took a flight, then you would be covered with an insurance policy. Now, post 9/11, you have to buy a separate travel insurance policy to be covered under any kind of accidents, whether it is simple accident to terrorism, right? Post 9/11, we saw many countries building a dedicated terrorism pool. Post 9/11, we saw huge, investment in surveillance, huge investment in making airports and all these places much more safer, much more contained, much more secured. So there was a lot of effort. So the intelligence was beefed up. So 9/11 actually changed the way we looked at our neighbors also. So 9/11 is very interesting whether you look at the financial sector or any other sector for that matter. Similarly, I personally feel COVID-19 is also a disaster that is going to change the way we have been thinking so far, possibly even with regard to the environment. For example, did you ever think that why these rural people have very less severity or frequency or reports of COVID? Why the people in the tribal areas or in the hilly regions, hilly communities, they are having lesser and lesser numbers of this? Why is it only that people migrating from cities are carrying this with them, or is it only being carried from the cities? Or is it that the people living there in the natural environment, they are much more immune, they're much more strong in terms of their health, in terms of their livelihood? Okay, and finally, it is very interesting. People are going back to their roots. That means they're going back from the secondary and tertiary sectors to the primary sector. When you look at this entire migration, why they're going back? They're going back to the natural environment, to their natural habitat. Okay. So in all, COVID-19 is very, very funny, at least for us, like, people who are working in environment, natural disasters, so on and so forth, because we see there are many positives that are coming out. Of course, at a cost. Okay. So if you ask me as an economist, is this environment what we have right now a cleaner environment? I will give you another example. The newspaper report says that the air quality has improved. Do you know what has deteriorated? The indoor air quality has deteriorated. The reason being, the women are now at home because the men is also at home, and they're actually spending more time cooking for the men and the children. So therefore, the indoor air quality has actually degraded. There are some reports which talks about that as well. So anyway, so the point is that the environment is clearing up. From a micro's perspective, this may be good at an individual level, but if you look at the society's point of view, it is coming at a huge societal cost. So simply by looking at that, the social marginal cost or social marginal benefit, we simply cannot say that this is good or this is acceptable. But it is showing the direction to the government. It is showing the direction to the authorities. It is showing the direction to the households, to the communities, to industries, that this is what you ought to do. Pollute less. Reduce your consumption. We are still alive by consuming less. We are still alive by producing less. So do we really need to consume this much? Do we really need to produce this much and tax the environment? Are we not, can we think that this is the new norm for sustainable development, or this is the new way in which we are going to go for sustainable development? So before I close formally, those who are interested, they can look at my small clip. I got more requests to write newspaper article, but I just kept myself away because I really don't want to go on that advising mode to authorities or to government, do that, do this, because things are very dynamic at this moment. We don't know what is going to happen tomorrow or even today evening. So those who are interested, they can look at the economic impact of COVID-19 that I wrote sometime in April when this crisis was actually starting. There I started with the argument that people are worried about the stock market, and I clearly wrote there that we should not bother about the stock market. You see, when many firms are actually performing badly, the stock market is behaving in a much better way, because there are one or two companies which are bringing huge amount of resources, FIIs in the country. So please don't look at the stock market and imagine that the COVID is having a bad impact on macroeconomy because the Sensex is going down. The Sensex had come back. It has come back and it has regained 38,000 where it almost was at one point in time. I have also talked about what government should do. I actually started with the notion by Keynes that in the long run we are all dead. So we should actually look at short run. So, but the government thought otherwise. So we are going on a reformist. We have adopted a reformist strategy. So again, you can see few lines on that. And finally, risk perception. Are we really bothered about COVID-19 now? This is something that we need to ask people on road. How many days can you bother to sit inside and enjoy this environment? Outside my window, it's a very clean air, but do I really want to enjoy this air? Do I really want to have this clean water when I know that there are many people who are dying of joblessness, hunger? They are being deprived of many of their amenities. So I think this is time when our perception also need to change. So some of you who are interested can look at this particular article and comment. For anything that you require additional material or resources, you can always get back to me. Drop a mail. I will be more than happy to help you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Subhidra, for your well-organized and pinpointed lecture. Now we start question answer session. We have few questions in the chat box. Shonjit Kundo, what triggers climate change impact more? A changing climate or changing non-climatic factors?
Pralay, can you repeat the first part?
What triggers climate change impact more? A changing climate or changing non-climatic factors?
Changing. Okay, so I'm not sure what you mean by non-climatic factors, because when you say, so there are two things over here. One is climate, another is weather. Okay, so generally I avoid using the term climate change, because what we observe in day-to-day life is nothing but weather variability. So the weather patterns are changing, right? So by climate, we mean temperature, precipitation, rainfall, blah, 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 all this kind of thing. Now, going back to climate, you see the climate changes on its own. And if you look at the way in which the climate changes or the weather changes, we have different seasons, right? So there are seasonal patterns. Now, beyond that, what we do is that we contribute to these, so when it is summer month, okay, if there are more and more activity and there are more and more release of harmful gases in the atmosphere, the pollutants, so it is going to warm up the atmosphere or the environment, So there are certain contributory factors which actually increases some of the cycles. Okay, and therefore we are also nowadays using these terms called extremes or catastrophes. So earlier we used to use the term catastrophe. Now we are using the term called extremes. Now why we are using the term extreme? Because these extremes may not affect you the way they were affecting you earlier, because now you are much more resilient, or you have adapted yourselves to it. For example, Moon lives in Middle East. He will talk to you about the temperature that is there right now. But he need not bother about that because he has a completely air-conditioned home and an office, right? But because of that activity, or because of we putting these, air conditioning facilities over here, we probably are warming up the environment in a much more, right? So probably by non-climatic factors, you are targeting these factors. That these are the non-climatic factors. Okay. So of course there will be the climate cycles will be there, the El Nino and the La Nina, these are there. But these are something that as an economist I need not bother. But I should be bothered about the economic activities. So some of the economic activities do release these pollutants in the environment, and they do really warm up. And we are when we talk about climate change, we are basically worried more and more about warming up. Okay, so I think that addresses part of your question.
Next question, Santanu Roy asked that domestic and foreign trade have been or is being disrupted for COVID-19. According to
I'm not a trade guy. Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe he's smiling. Munmun can answer that question.
Rahul Pal, what kind of valuation techniques should we use to analyzing the impact of COVID on environment?
Yes, very good question. So you see, if you really want to do the study that we wanted to do on water quality, you could do a travel cost method. So you can design your own questionnaire, and then you can go, because there are people who are still coming. Interestingly, even though this lockdown is there, even though there is this travel restriction, but there are still people who are coming from far distance to do certain rituals, like Shraddha or Mundan or something or the other. They are taking special permission and they are coming and they are doing this. Now one can go and ask them that this COVID is there. Haridwar district is one of the worst affected districts in Uttarakhand. Actually, it is the worst affected because we have around 1,000 cases, I guess. Roughly close to 1,000 cases we have in the state. So Haridwar district is the worst affected. So why do you take this risk to come to Haridwar to perform this activity? So probably somebody can do a travel cost, or somebody can also club travel cost with the contingent valuation method, and they can do a very interesting analysis as to also see how the risk behavior is actually changing. What actually forces them to change their behavior. There are many people who are coming in bulk. They're actually going to the hills. They're taking special permissions and they're going to the hills. By September, we hear that we will be opening the tourism for the other state tourists as well. So somebody can do such kind of analysis to see as to why people are doing this. Okay, why are they engaging in such kind of activities? So you can use some of the valuation techniques, travel costs, contingent valuation method, any kind of combined stated and real preference methods will do well, will give you very good answers.
Suvita, I have a question.
Yeah.
You said that during the lockdown period, we back to our primary sector, more is industrial sector, and people moving from secondary sector to primary sector. Yeah. So already we know that we are overburdened with disguised unemployment. And at that time, if people move to agriculture sector again, then what will be the profitability of agriculture or sustainability of the agriculture sector?
You see, actually, if you ask me and if you don't quote me anywhere, because I have not done any rigorous research to say that this is what it is, or this is how it is, or this is what the reason behind this kind of behavior or pattern. So I don't have any justification, but I am just using my economics brain to put forth some answer. The first thing is that Narega has played a huge role. Okay, so whether you read about reports that a primary teacher is actually digging a well, okay, or a laborer or a factory worker is digging a well, so they're all digging a well for one particular government policy, that is Narega, right? So that is one thing that possibly has forced people to believe that if I leave a city where my risk is high, where my livelihood is completely gone or lost once and for all, I may go back to my village and I am going to earn some livelihood and some living. I'm going to support my family. Now you have to also understand the social fabric in the rural India, right? And you in Raghunathpur will better understand the social fabric than me over here in rural. Okay, so many people in your area, in Raghunathpur, in Bedo, in what is that place name? I forget, Jaichandi Pahar and these adjoining areas. They all depend on Asansol and Purulia for their livelihood purposes. They all work in some area, some part of these particular cities or industry or whatever, right? Now, what will they do when these industries are closed down? So they will feel that that this emotional, psychological fear is there in these cities where they have lost their livelihood, where the people are not, the society is not so well knitted. So they will come back. They will go back to village, okay, and they will depend on their relatives. They will depend on the social fabric that exists in the village. So a person who goes to Bombay will have a much lower social network than in his own hometown or in his own village, right? So this is another factor which you can term it as a pull factor. So in development economics, we have talked about push factor and pull factor, right? So the push factor was the way, quote unquote, don't quote me again, the way in which the cities abandoned them, okay, or the cities communities abandoned them, or the environment abandoned them, and the way in which the villages accepted them. Okay, the villages, there are many reports where the villagers and the village have taken their own way and they have decided their own terms for quarantine. Okay, so there was no need for any government authority to go and intervene. They have done it on their own. Okay, will this happen in city? No. Why? Because my next door neighbor is coming from where I don't know. But in village, it is not so. So not only that you are in safer hands, you are secured, but there is some sense of income guarantee that I will be able to do something. Okay, reverse migration will start again. The reverse migration will start again. Very soon it is going to start. Okay, because the village resources are also getting depleted. Okay, congestion is also there. You cannot hire 10 people to dug the same well. Okay, so more and more the realities of life in rural India, congestion, all these things crop up. We may again see migration back. Okay, but for the time being, it is that environment possibly that is giving them more security, and therefore they have gone back. No doubt, manufacturing sector is the worst affected. Okay, and now because of this trend that people have already gone back, the sector is really under a lot of stress. Because now the government should, if I have to, give some suggestion to the government, whether it is the state government or the central government, whosoever it may be, any government for that matter, okay, a government in Timbuktu maybe, the suggestion should be that you give some incentive to these fellows so that they can now come back, at least in few numbers, so that the manufacturing sector actually starts working back on its feet. Because right now, because of labor scarcity, I know there are many industries which are not able to work. There are many industries which are simply not able to work. Production is completely stopped. Okay, so this temporary phase will come down. It will go out. We will overcome this soon, all of us. and maybe in some time we will see this reverse migration again starting from the rural India to the urban centers. Yes. Did I understand your question correctly?
Okay. Is there any question? Oh, one question is there. Aparajita Nandi asked that during lockdown period, quality of environment has gone up. But one day when we will overcome COVID-19 pandemic, how can we be able to maintain this quality environment without compromising level of production?
It is only through changing behavior and enforcement.
Okay, I think
so you can tell this to the particular person who has asked this question that I have already showed a graph. This paper by Lokhandwala and Gautam. So where they have actually shown that Ghaziabad air quality improved temporarily. Again, it has gone back to the same level. Okay, so it is completely the way in which we as individuals perceive actions and the enforcement authorities. So why is it that it has gone back to its original level so fast, right? Now, the point that is important over here is that if this is what we can do, then the question is, should we reduce production to this level so that the environment can thrive? Should we reduce the consumption to this level so that the environment can thrive? I think this is something that are very basic individual micro level questions and micro level decisions, and each one of us need to contribute. It cannot be simply the action of the government or the role of the government to intervene and do this, right? So production, consumption decisions, these are typically individual level decisions. If we are able to do well with work from home, and we are assuming that we are contributing less, we are actually reducing the pollution, then we should do that.
Okay. Thank you, Subhita. I think Professor Subhasis Bhattacharya want to ask any questions. Introducing Subhita. Professor Subhasis Bhattacharya is the head of the department, Sidhu-Kanupishya University, Department of Economics, and one of my guide and philosopher also.
Okay.
Sir, please.
I have one query, that is you said that after 9/11 the insurance companies rethinking about their policies and they're rebuilding this, considering minimizing the risk. So observing such a lucrative situation of the environment during COVID-19, what is your view that we have to rebuild or rethink about our pollutants policies, that certificates go, that is more merger or internalizations, these kind of thinkings which are required to control the profit level. For example, thermal power plant situations, they have to modernize more level like Western countries. This situation, what is your vision regarding this?
So with regard to insurance, of course we see there is a lot of development in the insurance sector. If you look at the way in which IRDAI has intervened, so it has actually instructed the insurance companies to sell COVID policies. If I have to give you some background information, initially the insurance companies were not willing; they were hesitant. Because initially, if you remember, when these numbers were coming out regarding the cost for treatment and so on and so forth, they were like completely astronomical figures. People were worried. Today, situation is little different. We know that the cost is not that much. State is also subsidizing if we are going for state-based or state-funded healthcare services, or we are able to manage at home. So, so the insurance companies also have taken stock of the situation, and they are also developing products in the same line. Of course, if you have chances of comorbidity and if you have some other kind of ailments, the insurance companies are still little hesitant. So that I still understand, and I talk to my friends who are in the insurance industry, and I realize that there are some obvious problems with some potential insurance. Now, coming to our next question as to what should be with regard to the, so you see we have this CPCP, okay, every state we have this pollution control boards, etc. I think we need to collect data. some agency should collect data on air quality, water quality, and other parameters, and this data needs to be very thoroughly analyzed, and we need to understand what is the cost of getting or reaching this level of air quality or water quality, or what is the economic cost involved in reducing the improving the environmental quality. And if we are happy to actualize the economic goals or the economic benefits to achieve this quality, then we should consider this to be a new normal. But I am afraid this is not going to be the case, because this is just a temporary phase. Okay, but this COVID has actually showed us that we can do it. So the best point is that we are trying to show that we can do this. How we do it, we leave it to the policymakers, we leave it to those who need to design them. You must have heard that, or read this news that IIT Bombay has recently declined from installing those, these air purifiers and filters and so on and so forth. They have their own set of arguments, own set of concerns regarding this thing, and for that Supreme Court has actually gone back to IIT Bombay. We don't want to discuss all these things, but the point is that this has shown us some guidelines. It has shown us some pathways, and this is also similar for some other sectors. Okay, we can do away with some profitability if we really love the environment, if we really feel that this is the environment that we really want to live in. I hope, sir, I have addressed some of your questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Subidha. Okay, thank you, Subidha. Thank you once again.
Yeah, okay.
And the college feel honored and privileged to listen to you. And we have another or last speaker of the day. Or actually, he is the thank you all of participants and dignitaries. Thank you, the convener of the webinar, to give me the opportunity, the honor and the privilege to introduce my friends and my seniors. And now I introduce my friend Indrajit Adhikari, the special representative, business desk, special representative, Delhi Bureau, Anandabazar Patrika. It is really a great privilege to honor to introduce my roommate, with whom I spent 5 long years during my graduation and post-graduation at Vishwabharati Santiniketan. Our professional responsibilities might have created physical distance between us, but still now he is my soulmate, my friend, philosopher and guide. He shaped me up to a great extent, and what am I today? A part of this credibility also goes to him. Now I formally introduce Indrajit Adhikari. Mr. Indrajit Adhikari has been a financial journalist and economic writer for close a decade and a half. He completed his schooling from Narendra Ramakrishna Mission School. Right after completing the Masters in Economics from Vishwabharati Santiniketan, he joined ABP or Anandabazar Patrika, one of the leading media conglomerates in India, as a trainee journalist in its business bureau in 2005, and eventually become the business editor in the year 2018. Currently, he has been serving as special representative of Delhi Bureau of Anandabazar Patrika, where he writes about economic developments, political happenings, socio-economic changes, and socio-political issues. Business specially tracks and covers the Ministry of Labour, Government of India. During the lockdown, he extensively covered labor issues like difficulty of migrant laborers, pathetic condition of daily wage earners, enormous problem of the workers or unorganized sector, attempt to change in labor laws, even aimed this period, etc. He is a keen follower of the change in labor market due to the trend of technology at a lightning pace. He has the experience of taking classes as a visiting faculty at Calcutta University, Bardwan University, Vishwabharati University, and few MBA schools. He is also a member of the syllabus committee of Kolani University and a regular participant at panel, seminars, and workshop on subject of interest. His subject of interest includes pattern of information, consumption, labor economics, media's role in growth and development of the economy, fiscal and monetary policy, behavioral economics, consumer psychology, etc. His strength areas are excellent public speaker, strong interpersonal and communication skill, natural leader with skill in delegating responsibility to team members, giving him the tools and time to manage them effectively and bring out best from them. Ability to grasp the present complex development, including data, in a lucid manner, especially in economic, socio-economic, business, financial, and political domain. Excellent writing and editing skill. It is a great privilege us that we get such a dynamic personality as our resource person in this webinar lecture. Now I would like to request Mr. Indrajit Adhikari or Indro to enlighten us with your views in this topic. Mr. Indrajit Adhikari, please. Indrajit Adhikari. Mr. Indrajit Adhikari, unmute yourself. Pintu, is there any technical problem? Indrajit Adhikari, I am rejoining. In the chat box. He is right. I am rejoining. I am audible. I think his link is.
So, like, key problem, okay. What is the problem?
He is rejoining.
Rejoining.
Join করেছে কিনা দেখো পিন্টু।
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. And am I
Please switch on.
also?
Switch on the video. You are not visible.
Yes, I'm facing an issue with the video, I guess. I was trying earlier as well. I'm extremely sorry. I guess something is wrong with the camera. Is my video coming or is it okay? Okay, fair enough. I should not waste your time. It's precious. Am I audible clearly? Then I can go ahead. Okay. I will try to get myself in the video, but I don't know what is the problem. It's showing that there is an issue with this Google tool on the camera. May I be given 1 more minute? I can rejoin? Is that okay with you, or should I go ahead? Okay, I'm just taking 1 more minute. I'm extremely sorry for this. Extremely sorry. Yeah, am I audible? But visible. Okay, not an issue. Let me start then. Not an issue. Well, I guess there is some technical problem happening here. I'm extremely sorry for this one. First of all, thank you so much for the kind introduction you provided. Was not only my batchmate, my friend, my soulmate, to be for sure. But just one word regarding whatever he has said about me, it's exaggeration. First, let me thank Raghunathpur College, Honorable Principal Sir, all the dignitaries present here, all the faculty members, and all the people, including students, teachers, eminent speakers, who have joined over this webinar rather, in last couple of days. I'm sure of all of them, I'm the least known, least educated, least learned person. And here I joined more for learning than for telling. But thanks for having me. As a journalist, I'll not go to, anyway, video is not available. Thankfully, I'm not dependent on PowerPoint presentations. And I know that I am the last speaker who is standing between the closure of this webinar and also the this closure of this webinar, and also the I was looking anxious, people are asking for feedback forms. So I would like to try to keep it as simple as possible, as lucid as possible, and also to make it full of stories, anecdotes, and also, just go through the areas that I love to walk through as a journalist. I will be on time, I hope. So I would like to keep it as short as possible, as crass as possible. As my earlier speakers today have already discussed about economy and also environment, of the topic itself, 2 things are left. One, health, and second is future. So today I'll be concentrating more on them. Just when I was Googling through today morning, one news I saw today that Leonardo DiCaprio, the heartthrob of the Titanic movie, he has signed an agreement with Apple TV to produce web series, movies exclusively for them. Because they will be making movies solely for Apple, and people will see those movies in the Apple TV for the first time as well. That means the movies will not be, the curtain raiser will not be in the movie theaters. Rather, it will be in your home. It's not that it's happening for the first time. Netflix was there, HBO was there, and we all know who they are after particularly this COVID period. But a star, a superstar to be specific, like Leonardo DiCaprio, to sign it, knowing that you never know when the normalcy in movie theater will come back, is significant enough to understand what a deep impact COVID has made on the entire economic stuff. We are doing our classes from home. We are working from home. We are just doing everything right from here. Technology is surging like anything. So that is one point. If we just look at the other side, the other way around, as Shubinda was rightly pointing out, that reverse migration is happening, and it's happening fast. The migrant laborers, when the lockdown was imposed and it was announced by the government of India, they suddenly knew that all the contracts they were in, all have been breached simultaneously. Their owners told them that you are no more needed in your work, so contract of work was breached. Where they used to say, and where they used to live rather, that homeowner told him or her that go out of it because I know that you will not be able to pay your rent. So that contract was breached. Government didn't understand that they can be in huge trouble. So the basic we have, the contract we have with our elected government or governments, that contract was breached. And the only place they feel that they can be taken care of is their home. So they walk miles after miles trying to reach their home. Some of them died midway. Some of them also gave birth. But eventually, these two polar opposite things give us a clear indication, give us a very clear signal about just one thing, that what an impact COVID is doing to us. At one end, probably we are doing a webinar where somebody is joining from as far as Middle East, like just that week, and give an excellent presentation. And at the other end, people are going back to their home in the village because they are not feeling safe, secure, contained in their workplace. And COVID told us, welcome to this new life. About health, as I was mentioning, we started to chart a very uncertain, very unpredictable territory, unpredictable path. Long ago, this COVID happened. And it started with, to be very honest, with the globalization, liberalization. It happened. It has, and it had profound effects on our economy, but probably COVID will be fast-tracking a lot of the processes. That's the key thing. And that's a wonderful thing to observe as a journalist. Just look at health. In each budget, be it of the state, be it of the center, enormous time generally is being spent each year when we talk about these two issues, because we believe these two are fundamentals to the social spendings. But COVID has shown us, pointing fingers towards, very rudely, if I may say, that how unprepared, how underprepared we are when we are facing a pandemic of this scale. Forget about India. 1.5 lakhs almost people have already died in USA. European countries like Italy, Spain, they are tottering, in fact, in terms of death, in terms of infection. So the so-called developed world, a small virus has brought them all to their knees. And we have seen that how little prepared we were in terms of our health infrastructure. And just yesterday, one labor organization called UC, they have submitted a letter to the Finance Minister of India, Nirmala Sitharaman, asking that this is the time the government should intervene and they should make sure that the health budget each year from the center should be at least 6% of the GDP. Because we have seen that people are dying not because this disease is as deadly as AIDS or tuberculosis. People are dying because it's so infectious that so many people are getting so infected that you hardly have any hospital bed. You hardly have ICU beds. You don't have enough infrastructure for ventilators. You don't have even enough oxygen cylinders as well. Be it in developed country, be it in developing country, the scenario is all the same. And the unfortunate part is, forget about 6%. And they have mentioned that in annual budget, it's only 1.29% that we actually spend on our health. It's lower, forget about any of the developed countries. It's even lower than most of the, if I can say, the rest of the BRICS countries as well. We are talking a lot about webinars. We are thinking a lot about online education. We are also going forward in a great way, saying that we are just transmitting to digital information age. But unfortunate part is, even there, for last 52 years, this same 6% of GDP target is standing tall. It's not even 4% till now, though government claimed that combining all the states and union territories and the central government, this is now 4.43%. But do you know what is the percentage of central government's contribution to the education in terms of GDP? Unfortunately, it's 0.44%. I repeat, 0.44%. It's not that this government alone is the villain. Even in the previous UPA government, it hovered between 0.6% to 1.1%, or maybe 1.2%. Even this government, which has brought recently this, which has recently brought this new education policy, from 2013-14 to till now, the in terms of GDP, the government's contribution to education, their spending to education has come down from 0.53% to 0.44%, which is shocking, alarming, and if I may say, disturbing. Because these two are the key heads of the social spending. And if I just say, not only that, we are talking about COVID will be a knowledge barrier thing. COVID will empower us, at least will encourage us, if I can say, to increase the hunger for knowledge, because there will be a paradigm shift in the technology that I'll be coming to later. So people will be educated, and they will be educated in a bigger way, in a bigger sense. For that, we need new infrastructure, new classrooms, new digital infrastructure as well. And do you know, combining all the states and union territories, what is the percentage of budget that we spend over the years in education? In 2012 and 13, it was 41.66%. In 2019 and 20, again, it has come down. It's 35.15%. But that is not important. Important is, of this 40.7% in 2012-13, only 0.96% was in new infrastructure. Rest was spent in the pension, insanity. In 2019-20, that has increased to 1.32%. Again, a minuscule figure. And please remember, even this increase is mainly because government is shrinking its budget as it is taking more and more, if I say, non-permanent teachers. So the basic two tools that we are trying to fight COVID with, we are ill-equipped with them. Unfortunate, but harsh truth. It has also been raised, this question has been also raised again and again and repeatedly, that lockdown is not going to heal or cure the virus for sure. So why should we go for a lockdown? The simple analogy was, this will allow the government, both central and all the states, so that they can build at least temporary infrastructure for health, new beds, new ICU,